And my presentation today is called Rightful Place, Black Humanism from the Past into the Future. So a bit about me. I was born and raised in New York City. And I relocated to Atlanta with my family at the end of 1997. I consider myself one of the very few fortunate people of color who was raised secular. And to date myself, I will be 42 in about 2 weeks. So I was born in 1976, which, if you remember, was a very, very pivotal and radical time in the Black community, especially in cities like New York, where there was a wave of Black consciousness. There were people who were looking to identify more with Black pride and Black culture and eschewing a lot of the white supremacy ideals. So I come from that time period. It's a period of, I think the Panthers were still around. They were around in the 60s, but it was still kind of like a very, very radical time back then. And so I was born then, and I actually love a lot of 70s culture. And so being born and raised in New York and actually raised secular, though I was exposed to religion through a voice instructor. I am a classically trained singer. So I had an outsider's view of religion. I used to sing in various churches and got some outside information about religion. I was an avid reader. My mother was very much a proponent of the critical thinking process and taking me and my brothers to the library. So I learned a lot. Learned a lot about, from a very, very secular perspective. And one of the things I learned early on was how religion was imposed, for lack of a more harsh term, to put it mildly, during slavery. So I decided from there on out that I was not going to worship white Jesus. But over the years, I began to assess my identity. I first said I was an atheist when I was 14 years old, because I was extremely radical, very, very in your face. The white man is keeping us down. Really, I didn't say it as calmly as I am now. But someone asked me, was I an atheist when I was 14 years old? And I asked, well, what did that mean? And I was told that I didn't believe in heaven or hell. And I said, that sounds about right to me, because I never could reconcile the thought of an afterlife or an afterlife without evidence, because of course no one had ever come back from the dead to say whether there was a heaven or hell. But after a while, I would call myself spiritual but not religious, and never really gave it much thought, except for understanding my thoughts on Christianity in particular, which I despised as a religion in particular, as well as learning about other religions and other gods from a more academic perspective. But I really began to reassess my atheism and my upbringing in 2010, when I re-identified. So just giving sort of a short version. And so there's probably some other stuff here. Yes. So founded Black Nonbelievers in 2011. Started as Black Nonbelievers of Atlanta locally because of the high presence of religion within the Black community, as well as the lack of diversity and inclusion within the secular community. The need to increase our presence and build that community, particularly amongst Black folks who either were fully atheist, or agnostic, or just doubting and questioning, for people to know that yes, there are others like us and we do exist. And so from that point, from then till now, we have expanded our scope nationally, and we are now up to 12 affiliates nationwide. We just established our 12th affiliate in the St. Louis area. And it looks like in the very near future, we're about to expand into the Minneapolis and St. Paul area. And we have our representative from Detroit, our Detroit affiliate in the building today, fellow board member, my sister Bria. And many of you may know Mahad from Black Freethinkers of Minnesota, and where we're in talks now to change it over to the Black Nonbelievers of Minneapolis. So stay tuned for more information about that. And if there wasn't any proof that our organization was needed, you now see more of us not just coming out and being visible, but also organizing and wanting to get involved. So this is proof positive that what we started was important. But also another aspect of why we started this organization, or why it was started. While we started Black Nonbelievers, I was an event services manager at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, which I recently resigned from in March to take on activism full-time. And it was right the day after I put in my resignation, I think, that David emailed me and said that I was being presented with the UU Humanist Association's Person of the Year Award. So that was very, very timely and unexpected, but definitely appreciated. So here I was, and here we were, starting and developing this organization and our presence while I was still working full-time. I also have a family. I have 3 children, and I'm a wife as well. So being able to juggle all that, sometimes I don't know how I do it. But I go back to my upbringing, my secular upbringing, and learning a lot about Black history and culture, and impart this in my presentations because there is still a lack of knowledge about the history of Black free thought and humanism in this country. Yes, it is no secret, and it is very well understood, unfortunately, that the Black community, I think the new numbers now are 87% still identify as religious. There are a number of reasons for that, but within that, there has been a presence of humanism, free thought, challenging of religion within the Black community historically. Unfortunately, that information tends to be obscured. So what we do is we impart that information and we re-educate on that. So bringing it back a bit. So we're gonna go through I'm gonna spotlight 5 notable historical folks from the Black community who were humanists, free thinkers, and who also challenged religion. So we're gonna start with, is there a handheld somewhere? Because I might need to see the computer too.
I think we got it on, so.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Because I'm gonna need to get from behind this, which is good for me, because I like to be a little bit more engaging.
All right. Yeah, this is kind of distant back here.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you. Okay. Awesome. So another way that you can help support my activism is at Patreon. I do a lot of writing there. I do a lot of sharing of my appearances and tips on how to build better community, just as an FYI. Well, we're going to go and speak. The first person that I'm going to highlight here is Frederick Douglass. I think everyone here knows who Frederick Douglass is. Born in 1818, died in 1895. Former slave, supported racial equality, educational opportunity, and immigrant rights. He participated in the first Women's Rights Convention in 1848 and signed the Declaration of Sentiments. And he openly challenged pro-slavery Christianity in an 1852 oration in Buffalo, New York. And in his statement, he said, we welcome all atheists and infidels to basically challenge what was the sentiment behind slavery in Christianity. That wasn't ignored back then. We must also highlight Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Who here is familiar with Carter G. Woodson? Wow. Okay, so we're going to give a little background on Dr. Carter G. Woodson. He's an African-American historian, author of The Miseducation of the Negro, founder of Negro History Week in 1926, which would later become Black History Month. So guess what? The foundations of Black History Month was started by a free thinker, someone who challenged religion. So yes, our roots and foundations are very, very much alive in this country, for those who didn't know. Also, W.E.B. Du Bois was a freethinker, author of The Souls of Black Folk. He's the founder of the Niagara Movement, also the co-founder of the NAACP. Interestingly enough, I was at an event in Atlanta earlier this year. This was the anniversary event of the Atlanta Women's March. You know, we were doing the women's marches across the country. The Atlanta chapter president of the NAACP was in attendance, and he stopped by our table. And he introduced himself. We had some dialogue, and I said, "Oh, yeah. So you do know one of your co-founders, W.E.B. Du Bois, was a freethinker?" And he said, "Oh, yeah. I was reading up on him. I'm kind of catching up." I'm like, which is very, very interesting. He went on to tell me that he banned prayer from the openings of their meetings, because even though he was a Christian, that was very, very off-putting and deterring to new members and to people from other religious backgrounds. I'm not sure if he would have said that if I had mentioned the foundations of the NAACP, because it is very, very religious in nature. But this is one of the reasons why we do what we do, because people need to know and understand that. We must also recognize A. Philip Randolph. Asa Philip Randolph, born in 1889 died in 1979. He was a founder of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union in 1925. He was the chief organizer for the 1963 March on Washington and worked very closely with Dr. Martin Luther King. He was also honored as the Humanist of the Year by the American Humanist Association in 1970, and I think signed on the Second Humanist Manifesto. And lastly, Butterfly McQueen, born in 1911 and 1995. American actress, best known for her role in Gone with the Wind. She spent her later years working with children and donated her body to medical science. And she was famously known for this quote: "As my ancestors are free from slavery, I am free from the slavery of religion." And the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is very well known, does use her in a lot of their literature and their material. Because it is very, very important, and it is important to note for all of us that not just these 5, but there are more. More information can be found on the website for African Americans for Humanism, which is a subsidiary of the Center for Inquiry. There is more information on historically Black freethinkers and atheists and humanists, as well as current leaders and organizers in the secular movement. So why is this information important? Because first and foremost, the Black community never has been a monolith, and more of us are proving that we are not going into the future. There are more of us who are challenging the very, very, the religious beliefs of their parents, of our parents, and from old. So there are a lot of folks who are not buying the fire and brimstone, the restriction of religion, as well as the non-evidentiary points of religion either. So we never have been a monolith, we never will be. And so this is history that we all need to know. The history and current presence of atheism and humanism among people of color is being obscured. When you think of atheism, when you think of humanism, who do you often think of? You often think of, yes, Richard Dawkins, your Christopher Hitchens, your Sam Harris's, lots of other people, white people who are still very well known. And that is not to knock their accomplishments. However, knowing that there is a long history of humanism and atheism in the Black community, there should be no reason why our narrative isn't included. And that is another reason why we started, because we have to bring that, we have to redefine and reshape that narrative. It is very, very important. It is being obscured, and guess what? It has been up to us but also it shouldn't always be up to us, because the information is there, but it is up to us, to all of us, to find it. And again, we must be more inclusive in our narrative and our actions. It's nice to think that we're just one homogeneous and loving community, but the systematic and institutional racism and injustice cannot, that does not ring it to be true. So there are a lot of attitudes that need to change. A lot of attitudes, a lot of actions, how people are viewing people of color, as well as the actions that and what we're doing. So there's a lot that we need to reflect on here. And not just reflect on, we need to be, like I said, not just reflecting, but also changing not just our minds and how we think, but also what we do. So working towards the future. And this is the July and August issue cover of the Humanist magazine that features myself, Bridget Crutchfield, who's in the audience, Dr. Sakivu Hutchinson, who is out of LA, Los Angeles, Liz Ross, who is also in Los Angeles, and Candace Gorham, who is in Raleigh, North Carolina. Candace is the author of the Ebony Exodus Project, Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion and Why Others Should Too. Sakivu Hutchinson is also the authors of Moral Combat and Godless Americana, and White Knight's Black Paradise, which is a book based on the Jim Jones tragedy, the Jonestown tragedy. So, as I said in Kansas City, last year at the Secular Student Alliance's conference, there was a young lady and her mom who walked through the area where we were located. They came right up to our table, and the mother asked me what our organization was about. And when I explained it to her, the mom turned to her daughter and said, "Well, she sounds just like you." Which means that, yes, as I said before, the younger generations are not buying it. The mom also went on to explain further that she had her own doubts about religion, but that she had issues and challenges with her family accepting that. So it really was a good dialogue, but it's showing that, for one, even though we have our challenges as atheists, humanists, people who have done away with the traditional religions, there are more of us. Our presence has helped encourage more people who need to see that they aren't the only ones out here, and that there are more of us who are making history. We are being groundbreaking in our actions, even if we don't think that we are. Because Black Nonbelievers wasn't started to try to I didn't start it to try to put myself out here and be this big. I started it because, for one, it was liberating for me. Because I had to be comfortable with myself and some things that my upbringing, even though it was secular, wasn't that great. So I was able to come out of it and understand and be more liberated by identifying as an atheist, and humanist, and secular. And there are others who are still in that middle, on that middle ground. They don't know whether they should. They don't know whether they don't know that it's okay to come out. And that was one of the reasons why we were formed. And as we grow, as this community grows, we must take our rightful place in history, We must take our rightful place in the communities that we represent. And we are intersectional. We represent the Black community unapologetically. We represent the secular community unapologetically. And wherever we go, for all of us, this isn't just Black history, this is American history. We need to understand that. It is American history, which means that this information is important and crucial for all of us. And so it must be understood that it is up to all of us to redefine and reshape that narrative. It isn't just up to one segment of the population.